Hi. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a very exciting session planned for everyone today. We are going to be doing a virtual visit to Spot, which is a micro school in Bangalore, and we'll also hold space for a discussion on micro schools, which is a concept I'm personally very intrigued by. But before that, uh, I'd like to tell you a little bit about what is it that we do at the Circle. We are trying to reinvent schools and after schools across India. We're trying to build capacity in various stakeholders, educators, entrepreneurs, school leaders, and we are also supporting teaching institutes, all to the all to the purpose of reinvention to be able to think about uh, how learning happens and what needs to happen differently in our schools and learning spaces. We hope that if we empower educators and school leaders, we hope that they can actually then empower students, especially students in low income communities, to thrive in their lives, to really make the world a better place, and of course, the country a much better place. How we do that is through a 2 year incubation for entrepreneurs who are committed and ready to dive in and create their own school after school, to reinvent for their context and to be really able to shift learning outcomes and life outcomes for students in their communities. We also have the Circle Labs, which is a platform for short term programming for educators, entrepreneurs, school leaders, and just about anyone who really cares about what the future of schools could look like. Uh, we help create multi-month programs, one-day workshops, forums such as this, which are really able to expose people to reinvention and help them and empower them to try out their own ideas on the ground. We are also able to give people grants to pilot their projects in their communities and to really see what is it that children in their communities need. With that said, we're just going to jump quickly into our conversation today, which is happening with Spot. Spot is an exciting micro school in Bangalore that believes that every child has unique passions and skills and need to be given the platform to really build on that and not just academics. Spot is a micro school, which is a concept that we'll try to really expand with you today, and we're going to hold a panel discussion around 6:30 to talk a little bit more about the topic. And you can all, if you'd like, you can also ask questions to the team that we have here today. We have Midun from Spot. Midun is the founder of Spot. Midun is also a Circle partner, and he was a part of our first ever cohort at the Circle incubation. He really is out there championing what does it mean to include students who are across the spectrum of neurodivergence, and he's really championing what it means to create learning spaces for them, and not just them but all children. Sinduri is the co-founder at Spot, and she's also here with us and will be walking us through what is it that Spot does, how they approach learning, and also will help us gain more insights on micro schools. Sinduri is also a Circle entrepreneur. I'm going to hand it over to Midun and Sinduri, talk a little bit about Spot. We're going to start with a video, and then there will be more discussion on what is Spot doing. Sinduri and Midun would love for you to introduce yourselves, and we'll jump into the virtual visit.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Mithun. I'm one of the co-founders at Spot. I've also been a circle entrepreneur for the last 2 years, touring across the country, seeing different schools, and trying to frame our thesis on what we wanted to build. And Spot is a very young space. I think we started in January as an after-school space, and our year one is going to come next year. So, I mean, the conversation is more centered around what we are trying to build from the lens of, I call it the last bencher school, right? Like from the lens of saying that the school built for a last bencher who don't really fit into a traditional classroom, is how I see it. And probably we'll talk more about it and once you see the video. Sundari, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. I'm Sinduri. I'd introduce myself as a parent and someone who wants to really reimagine learning for children, because I probably am the opposite of Medun. I was a very first bencher in the school, but I've come to question, hey, what did the first bench actually mean, as I was in the corporate and startup space for more than a decade. And now want to come back and say that what does it mean for all kinds of learners and all people to benefit from what education has to offer. So that's the anchor that is based on which we're all here together to build Spot. Midun, over to you, and or Amina, if you want to play the video.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that, both. I'm very excited to hear from you. I'm just going to quickly share the video that we have for Spot. All right. Just a note, this is a fairly comprehensive video. We'll be able to look at it in the next 5 to 6 minutes. If you can keep putting any sparks or questions or thoughts that are coming up as you go through the video, feel free to populate that in the chat, and we'll have Midun and Sindhuri respond that for you. I'm just going to quickly play it. Okay, I hope my screen is visible. Sindhuri, can you just show me a quick thumbs up? Okay, great. All right, here we go.
Micro school. We believe in going beyond the traditional methods of career tests. We are Spot Micro School. We believe in going beyond the traditional methods of career tests.
We believe in understanding our teams, listening to their dreams and passions.
After we understand their skills and strengths, we then get them in touch with the industry mentor. This industry mentor will help them explore and experience their future careers even better. It's all about helping them find their unique path. At Spot, we believe in helping our child turn their passion into a possibility.
Large traditional schools just find it so hard to keep pace with what is happening in the world outside and what is the teaching learning that's happening within a classroom. But micro schools are essentially smaller learning environments with smaller class sizes and personalized learning approaches. And this is a space where we keep the learner's needs at the center. And this gives an opportunity for children to love learning and then find who they are when and what they want to be in the world outside. And I truly believe micro schools are here to revolutionize how education should happen in the future.
Hi, I'm Anjana. I'm going to introduce all to Spot.
Spot is an inclusive space. Here we run after-school program for the age group of 10 to 17.
Spot gives everyone equal attention and it teaches learning in more practical way. Now let's see the interior of the Spot. Now we go to the first room.
Hi, my name is Pragya. This is the relaxation room.
So this is the green room or relaxation room where people chill, chat and play board games. And they have a lot of designs like amazing fluffy clouds, and they also have bunk bed, and there's a super cute tree where they put lights and made it so amazing. And people can go there, chill, do coding and do whatever they want. They also have a scramble board here where we can write many words and letters, and all those letters are in this box. And it is also a magnetic, which is again a cool thing. And the second room will be a pantry room where the team members, eat lunch together. And this is the place where they, have some relaxation time.
This is our facilitation area where we brainstorm together project works and take sessions.
And this is the maker space where the people who are coming here can do homework, chat and relax. And this is a very fun, cool place in this. So this is the and work, eat, chill, and we can do whatever we want.
This is our second investigation area. Here also we do group work, brainstorming and conduct training sessions.
So this is our boardroom where the client meetings and the admin team works.
This is our counseling room 1. This is our counseling room 2, where we conduct parent orientation sessions and give counseling for teens and adults.
This is all about my maker's journey. My most favorite star feature, and the next one will be the bubble one. If we light like this,
Wow.
my favorite moment was designing the star fidget and seeing it printing so perfectly.
Oh, and then you got the handle.
My favorite project was making the starfish and the snowman.
Okay, you printed your name there. Fine.
My favorite project was the apple project.
Oh, how did you make it?
The apple project was made. I made it via a 3D printer.
Wow.
And my biggest challenge was the hula hoop, which was again so much fun.
The software I designed it on was Tinkercad. In Tinkercad, I have made a big snowman, and the reason I made it is because I like Christmas.
To conclude, this spot is the most amazing, and no, you all need to experience spot. So support spot.
Okay. Yeah, I love the elements of play and joy as well, Pallavi, and also the space looked so cozy. So we're going to jump into hearing a little bit more about sport, the ethos, and the approach that they have to learning, and what is it that they really envision for children and the learners that they interact with. I'm going to invite Sinduri and Midun back again to walk us through a quick slide deck, and then we'll just after this we'll also take questions from you, so feel free to put them in the chat and we'll take them up in a bit.
Yeah. Hi everyone. I'm Mithun. See, I think fundamentally the lens building a school came from the lens saying that how do we as adults process learning, right? Like for example, let's say you want to build a furniture in your house. Do you go and sit and read and write about how to build how to probably make a tipo or whatever it is, right? You probably will go see a manual and you'll go build that particular thing. And then probably figure it out like in the middle of it, like, okay, the screws are missing, this is missing. I probably assemble it and then get it done. That's how fundamentally as an adult we learn anything, like from learning a guitar to doing gardening to anything. And then the question was coming like, we live in a world where we don't need to like invent. I think the time when we came to I think the last generation when millennials were there, we had to at least learn something to do a particular part of it. We need to probably by heart something and do it. Now that even when there's an AI and stuff and everything, still don't even need to learn something. They can ask a question and they'll get an answer around it. So then what is the fundamental purpose of how children would operate around learning, right? And how do we make learning fun for somebody who it's not fun? How do we make it more something that's like more centered around each child rather than saying that, hey, this is something you need to learn because it's there in the curriculum. That's a fundamental lens to which we started building sport. And microschools as a concept, next slide, Sindhu. Yeah. See, microschools as a concept is basically building a smaller school. So there is a psychologist theory by Danber which says that the maximum number of relationships a child can hold is about 150. The moment it goes beyond that, right? The child loses understanding of what are the people in that particular space. They all become alien to them. So the lens of us building a smaller school, which is usually, I mean, there are micro schools operating from 8 kids to 15 kids to about 100 to 150 kids. I think the maximum size that they say is about 100 kids is the ideal size for a micro school. The lens is very simple, that it's a community of children, adults, parents, and the world they live around it, which operates together as one ecosystem. It's not like the children walk into a gate and the gate gets closed and they operate in a different isolated ecosystem. And then they step into the world in the evening where they have no idea of what's around in the community. Right? If you even go, I mean, if you even target like some of the top international schools, beyond the school, the child's engagement with the community is probably an community visit, probably going and doing some CSR in some of the nearby village. But what is the level of interaction the child has with the community and the world around them? It's probably very less. So globally, micro school came as a moment in terms of how fast we do tinker around education, how fast we do iterate different things that we want to test out in education and do it. Even in the top, even in the top, like in US educational cities, they basically use micro school as a model to pilot the innovative ideas that they have. I think in India also there are a few places from Jigyasa, Komini, a few places which test on it. And there are independent micro schools which operate by themselves. I mean, which is not affiliated to anything. There is also like network micro schools which like Dreamtime Learning, Actun Academy, which basically lets you build a franchisee of that in India or in any other part of the world, and they give you like the whole curriculum and the learning pedagogy from there end, and you operate it, and the whole community of students across the world basically network together and learn. That is also one model of it. I think another one I think would be very pretty popular is the Astronova one, which Elon Musk has built for their kids, which is now being built into a full-fledged school, right? So there are like different models across the world that has been there in the past. But if you look at the core of it, it is all of them have the very similar thing, saying that they're focused on a personalized learning experience. Like instead of basically saying that children needs to go learn a particular curriculum and do a particular form of assessment, they're basically saying, let the learner flip the classroom to say that this is what I want to learn, this is the project that I want to undertake, and through this I will learn different things, right? And the second thing is, if you see, I mean, like, see, my other organizations support children in mainstream schools to be made inclusive, classrooms to be more inclusive. Something we see the biggest barrier to a learner who is very independent and learner who is very curious is a conformity bias, right? Like, as in, classrooms want children to be silent. Classrooms don't allow children to move around. Classrooms don't allow children to do X, do Y, or need to give you answers in a specific format. And they are not allowed to move beyond that boxes. And this basically restricts the learner giftedness, or whatever we call as a curious learner. And they become more conforming by nature. If they can't conform, then they get kicked out of the school. That's how it operates. So that's another factor of it. And the third thing is that, like, I think there is a whole movement towards hands-on learning, experiential learning, PBL-based learning. But what percentage of the traditional school learning environment is still built towards a PBL or a experiential learning? Probably to 10 to 20%. But in a micro school, it's almost about 80%. Because you're not trying to teach the child a theory, right? The research is basically something the child does it by themselves. The child is spending more time on the projects with the facilitator to understand how this particular thing takes place, and they integrate the concepts of science, maths, and different subjects to learn that particular thing, right? And the evaluation is also more from a portfolio lens than from a particular subject-oriented lens. And the last part is that children, if you are a learner who's very curious, or say a gifted learner, right, their accelerated questions or accelerated way of learning is something often seen as a challenge in a regular classroom. But here, like, we would see that as an encouragement. Like, if you see a child who is questioning different things, not confirming that I don't want to write, I don't want to do something like that, is something that we would want to encourage and see that, how is this learner doing that based on his learning style, is something that we would want to encourage on it. Yeah. Right. So I think Spot, like I said, Spot is an evolution of a front bencher and a last bencher approach, who felt that a classroom as a space was not fitting in, not working for both the generations. Like how much we conform to get grades and accelerate in your career, and somebody who figured that, yeah, I can sleep through my class and still get a degree out of it, right? Both the set of people have very similar life outcomes when it comes to having a career. So then the question arose in terms of, how do we create a space which caters to different kinds of learners? So that's from where the Spot has been built. And at Spot, for us, it's very simple. Like, it's a school for one. Like, the learning experience is tailor-made for each child who walks into the class, who says that this is my interest, this is how I learn, this is what my way of interacting with the classrooms are, this is how my way of interacting with building a project is. And then you find the resources and the tools to build for it. It's not an easy job to build that particular pathway, but that's what we want to undertake, right? And the second thing is the community becomes a core part of it. So the school by itself is like a building, right? So beyond that, how does the child participate in the community? How does the child work with the local businesses? How does the child work with the local environment? How does the child interact with the different spaces? And this happens on a day-to-day ongoing basis. It's not like a once in a visit that the child makes to the environment. They might do local internships. They might probably do projects with the local business over there. They might go solve for a public challenge that's out there, probably present that to a like a municipal person or something like that, right? So the interaction of the community and the environment is very crucial. And the parents also, like in any micro school, parents play a very critical role in becoming the core of the community. Because parents also become the facilitators, parents also share their expertise with the other children. They also co-create with the kids in terms of how these experience of these different children are. Because when we say industry mentorship or something like that, right, usually the assumption is that you have some corporate guy coming and giving gyan to these kids. But it's from the lens saying that there are different, I mean, if you have 30 kids, there are 30 parents with 30 different exposures who can come and share the same thing with your children, who can also become part of your curriculum in terms of facilitating for your kids. So those are the different ways in which we try to integrate different parts of it. So, and like, we constantly ask this question, who is a sport learner? Like, who is a kid who's best fit for sport? I would fundamentally look at that saying that is a child who probably feels that a traditional schooling system is not enough for them, that they're not benefiting by being in a classroom, which they're just writing and learning and just giving exams, and they want to do beyond it, right? And sport also combines both the school and the after school hours. So the lens has always been that, like, when for our children in the today's world, there's no third space. I mean, if the kid goes to school, they come home and then they either spend time on devices or they spend time on homeworks or they go to tuitions or they do something like that, right? But there's no third space for the child to feel that this is a space I can go and do whatever I want. So sport also wanted to be that space where we are open from, say, 10 o'clock we wanted to open till 7 p.m. in terms of the children doing different things. Even if it's not a child who comes for schooling at sport, it can be an after school space for any kid to come at the sport and use the 3D printer or use the maker's lab or use the reading room or use different spaces to just do whatever they want and act as a third space where children can, I mean, they create a community among themselves. Like they can create their own clubs, they can create their own interactions, they can create their own friendship, their own relationships. So we also wanted to be like a mini club for teens to come and operate over there. And any child who comes here is somebody who is curious and wants to learn more beyond what is there, what is there beyond classrooms. And the last part it is I'm sorry for the jumping of slides. Yeah. And the main focus we have is more in terms of saying that how do we use a classroom as a place to nurture creativity and innovation? How do we create projects that means like, this is a skill that the child could showcase in their portfolio to probably get a career path or something like that, right? And the another thing is like probably creating the different personas of, I think Sudhir will explain more about the personas that we try to work with, but understanding what is the learner personas. How do we figure out based on the learner persona, how do we create a learning path for that particular child based on their interest? And and I think, that the sense of this whole child is something that I feel like a lot of schools keep pushing. But I fundamentally believe that, like children are flawed and adults are all flawed as well. And there are certain areas of strengths which they have very huge spikes and certain areas where they're not that good at. So how do you use those strengths to probably benefit the child in ways would probably accelerate their education? At the same time, provide enough support for the kids in the areas that are weak to probably support them enough that they can function in the world. That's the lens to which we try to see that. And at the end of it, like we want a kid who can come and ask 110 questions and we don't have an answers for it. And we also start figuring it out as facilitators and as educators in the space. Yeah. See, because we also build this with the lens of inclusion for children. Something we figured was a lot of gifted learners who are basically children who are like really smart, but probably have, have like some form of disability, like an autism or ADHD, usually gets thrown out of a regular classroom. So how do we support those learners who want to build their own learning pathways? So we are like in partnership with Bridges Learning, trying to bring in a gifted and 2E lens to the Indian education system as well. The approach is very strengths based. And we have an expertise in terms of working with about 70 plus schools in mainstreaming inclusion. So bringing that in that particular lens as well in terms of providing the accommodations and the support in terms of the child is like non-speaking, we provide AAC accommodation and the different things that we can offer to cater to different learners who come to the classroom. The lens has always been that like if the child needs something, we will be able to find a solution for it. Yeah, I think Sindhuri will be able to probably take you through this.
Thank you, Midun. So, as Midun and I have been talking about and seeing with our own separate experiences as well, what it means for learners. When we went into schools and when I have engaged in schools in different programs, we've always looked at learning as learning 10 different subjects, 12 different subjects. But when we go out into the real world, we just believe that everything is so interconnected. And keeping those perspectives in mind is when the concept of learning domains appear. You look at your ability to apply or want to create or build, and what is your orientation towards each of these learning domains based on how you are as a persona, which is whether you're a social connector, whether you're someone who's more analytical, whether you're a creative problem solver. So we generally like to engage with kids, understand their orientations in terms of personality, and then move them across projects and experiences across different learning domains, like express, explore, innovate, live, so on. And many of the programs that we create and the spaces that we have at Spot, like how you saw the maker space, or it could be just the different elements that allow children to move and work from different places, all come from the aspect that we cannot alienate their learning and schooling experience from what they're going to encounter or what they're going to live post school. So keeping these learning domains as the broad framework, we have a lot of separate learning spaces, one being the maker space. The other is the aspect of studios, where we deep dive into one concept. If it could be AI and tech, we do that for 6 weeks at a stretch. If we want to take the aspect of understanding sustainability, we spend about 6 weeks understanding that. We do not want to break the learning in terms of separate subjects, but introduce different learning objectives through that. And even in this community immersions, where we, like Midun said, we engage with local businesses, we help them go do empathy surveys, small surveys, and then try to understand pain points that are happening within the system and use that as an area of learning the different subjects that they may potentially go back to applying it into. So the other spaces are also sitting with children, being just listeners to understand what are their strengths and interests, and from there move them into a path of career advisory or industry mentorship. And most of our children also benefit from the aspect of being able to take an NIOS approach, where we give them a lot of different offerings, where we take them on a project-based learning pathway and then use that as their learning space. But with those learnings, they come back and then engage in specific small set of exams with which they cross 10 standard and 12 standard more as a milestone than it being the anchor which is going to define who they want to be out in the real world. One other piece is also the Spot Fellowship that we have curated for children from low income spaces, coming from the angle that the children hardly have the opportunity to get exposure to different aspects or future oriented courses. So we take them through a path of expose, explore, embark to create a portfolio for the kids, to get them a network of peers and mentors who can actually help them then connect the dots and then find out what are the sort of career choices, what are the trajectories that they can take by engaging at Spot. And a lot of what we've been doing working closely with a lot of partners. Bridges specifically has helped in giving a lot of learning from a neurodiversity space. How do we operate and understand the learning print of a child? Be it grip tape or dent, when we curate different learning tracks and studios, or how can we champion kids by running certain challenges? We all do it in partnership with Grip Tape and Dent and Hashtag Code as our partners, who have enabled us to move in that direction. And I'm sure we are working to always cultivate more partnerships and bring in the right experiences that will support different learners who engage at Spot. Now, when they go through this, what are the different learning outcomes that we want for children is, can they go out with a portfolio that speaks of the work that they have done, rather than grades which really have no meaning to how they define themselves, or give anybody a real clarity of what this particular child could bring into your organization, or how they operate as a community member when they step out into the real world. So our focus is on helping them build life readiness and career readiness through the different learning experiences that is available to them at Spot. But I think more than that, how can they use Spot as a space where they feel they belong and they potentially have a voice, and it stays together as a place where people are listening to each other and believe that there is much lesser hierarchy, and we are co-learners with the children, and then facilitate from that perspective, because I think that's when you're really glued into knowing what's happening in the future. If as adults we are not willing to unlearn and relearn, I think you're just going back to create a you're going to create the same thing again in a different way. So I think we're 1 year young, but building through these experiences to ensure that it's available for a larger audience. Midun, you wanted to share something?
No, it's the second time. This.
Yep, I think that's about it. So connect with us at Spot, and over to you, Amina.
Right. Thank you so much for that. I also see that there's a different thread going on in the chat as well. So thank you for engaging. I've been reading the comments. Thanks for all the information you're putting out there, Billy Broad. I appreciate the discussion. Uh, I also took a few questions that came up, and I thought that would be relevant for the discussion. We can just as we segue into the panel, I'd love for us to pause and maybe reflect on these questions. And also, if anyone from the audience would like to come off of mute, if they have a question or anything that they want to run by the Spot team, feel free to. If any one of you would want to take up this question, Sinduri and Mithun, that'll be great.
Yeah, sure. You can close the presentation, Sandhiri. Yeah, Uttarika, I mean, we are open to offline visit. You're free to visit us anytime. Yeah. I just saw Billboard being there. I think I've been following his podcast for a while. So good to have him. And I think we connect on LinkedIn as well. So, I mean, I think Billboard does a lot of creative inputs on education and different models around it. And I think and is one of the most relevant podcasts. If anybody wants to check out, do check out Billboard's podcast.
Which podcast, if you can come again once?
It's Billboard. I think he's there on the chat. It's Billboard. I think he has his own podcast and I think a YouTube channel as well, where he basically talks to different educators and put content over there. Very interesting stuff he puts out there. Yeah. He's only put it over there. Thank you, Billboard. Yeah, Sharon.
Hi, Midun. The school sounds wonderful. And I've had the good fortune of working in a similar setting many years back. So I identify with a lot of stuff that you said, preparing kids for 21st century skills and sending them out for internships at a very young age. What I wanted to ask you is, how easy was it to get the kind of team that you wanted for your school? How easy or how hard? Because I don't think easy factors into it at all. So tell me how you found the people.
I don't think it's easy. And I think still we are like, I think each hire takes about 2 to 3 months, right?
Yeah.
To find the right fit of a hire is a hard thing. And second thing is, because we're very young and the number of kids we have is also very less, right? I think anybody who wants to teach, they come in with the lens saying, I've been teaching, say, 150 kids. How do I now come and get 15 or 20 kids? And even fitment in terms of moving from somebody who goes to flipped classroom, where they have been like, like traditionally been teaching, facilitating with a lesson plan or learning plan, to move and say, here you don't come with that. You come and probably just support the child in terms of what the project the kid wants to take forward. And then you
blows the mind of an average Indian, no? I mean, we didn't grow up like that at all. So yeah, so where are your people from so that I can quote them?
So, I think we've also been coaching people from different places. Honestly, I think that's
Okay.
I think we've been
So
able to.
poaching is the way to go.
Yeah, I think Circle has been great in terms of the network they have across the country, in terms of educators. So TFI networks, we tap on like the educators which are there in Bangalore, homeschooler groups, I mean, different spaces where we go and interact with. And there are a lot of people who come and say that, we would already want to come and collaborate with you and, like try some of our models over there, which is another thing that we are open to, like saying that, like, if you have a particular way that you think that would work for kids, we are open to piloting it, because we don't really, like say that this is the only way to teach something. And again, like, getting collaborators like Dent, Bridges Learning, are those kind of places also coming and helping us in terms of it. From a people lens, I think how we mostly try to do is, because I already have another organization which has a good number of people. So sometimes we upskill them to kind of come and become a facilitator or a coach or a career advisor to those kids, and then they adopt the roles. And I just believe, like, teaching is a mindset. So, and you don't need to come, and I don't come from a educational background. I have a background in psychology and a management degree, right?
Yeah, that is
Ask me
what I
like,
wanted to
yeah,
ask you.
ask me
Do
three
you
theories in
look
education,
for
I won't be
people?
able to say.
Correct. That's another thing I wanted to ask you. Do you look for a B.Ed or do
Nothing.
you hire from diverse fields like what do you do?
I don't think we look for any degree as such, right? We are open to people
Hmm.
coming with different experiences and how they want to
Yeah,
facilitate. The only thing is the
yeah,
alignment in terms of, like, I think there's a parent who's a doctor who wants to do gardening with us, right?
correct.
To teach children gardening. So I think it depends
Yeah,
on,
I can.
yeah, more from that lens.
I got that. And the Bridges collaboration is wonderful because neurodivergence is so little understood in India and so few schools provide for it. Was there someone on your team who prompted that?
So
Uh,
I'm myself like someone with ADHD who's building it. So
Correct.
that's the reason, one of the reason why we are anchoring towards it. And we have been supporting kids in about 70 plus schools in mainstreaming kids who are neurodiverse. So the other organization run called Insight basically provides shadow teachers, special educators in mainstream schools to have these kids included. So this is a line of work that we have been doing for about 9 years. And that's when we felt that kids that we have been supporting have slowly been started getting expelled from schools, right? And they're very
Yeah,
bright, smart kids who can do like excellent work. There's a girl who can write poetry, but she's a non-speaking child.
yeah,
So the school just kicked her out, right? So how
yeah.
do we support that child to probably pass the 9th and 10th in IGCSE syllabus? I think these are fundamental questions which we started doing it, but then we figured it's a fundamental problem that any learner who is probably just fighting with the traditional learning school system is facing.
Yeah,
Right.
why I asked that is I'm on the spectrum plus I have ADD. So I
Okay.
was probably a 2E myself, even as
Okay.
a student.
Yeah.
So, and I taught children like that as well myself. And I have rarely come across Indian schools that provide for this
Mm.
consciously. So it was very good to see. Thank you very much. Mm, May your tribe increase. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you so much. I know we had a few more questions. I'm just going to put them on chat so that we have a record of that. We're going to jump into the panel discussion that we had planned with Sinduri, Midun, and Prince, who is joining us as well. Ranjana, I see that you have raised your hand. I'm going to request you to maybe put your question on chat. And as we go ahead in the conversation, hopefully we're able to either weave in your question, or there will be a space for another uh, round for any questions that are coming from you. And I'm just gonna spotlight everyone. I'm just gonna give me a second. Okay. All right. Hi, Prince. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Sundari. Hi, Midun.
Hey, hi, Prince.
All right. So largely we designed this space because we thought, apart from the virtual visit and just hearing specifically about Spot as a micro school, I'm sure that people have a lot of questions around what happens when this concept is contextualized in India, which is a very diverse space. And some of the people already brought up the challenges and the divide that is in a rural urban space. How will that largely look like? So we wanted to ensure that everybody gets hopefully a little bit more information and a more nuanced discussion on how can we think about micro schools. Prince is also a circle entrepreneur, and he's building Micro Leaps, another micro school. Thank you for joining us, Prince. We think the perspectives that all three of you will bring will be great. Prince, before we start off, if you'd like to tell us a little bit more about Micro Leaps so that people have some context, that would be very helpful.
Well, yes, Prince Pune. That's right. Hi, everybody. My name is Prince. As Amina said, I'm currently one of the circle entrepreneurs working out of Pune. I'm one of the founders of Micro Leaps, what we believe is in micro schools. And we are trying to build a network of micro schools across the region because we feel like learning needs to look radically different, and mass schooling is not going to cater to that. And so an entirely different model is needed right now. And like from understanding on the ground, micro schools seem to be the next step. Right now, what we're doing is we work in an after school space in Pune, where we're piloting a lot of our approaches to say, okay, we have a really grand vision of what self-paced learning, self-directed learning needs to look like. How do we operationalize that? How do we make sure that it works for low-income children? Because that's the target audience that we work with predominantly. And yeah, so this year is a lot of piloting and experimenting to see what's working, what's not working, how do we approach this in the best way possible. Yeah, so that's where my experiences are going to come from. I'll be completely candid. I won't have all the answers because I'm also in the same boat of as Midun, right? I was saying, hey, we're figuring it out. It's messy, but that's fun. And as we go along, we'll figure out some of the answers. We may not have all the answers. So that's the lens I'm going to approach this conversation with.
All right. Thank you so much for that. So I think the question that I want to start off with is just getting a sense of what micro schools look like when we look at a global level, and then coming to India, what is the culture right now? I know, Midun, in your presentation, you mentioned a few micro schools that are great examples to work off of. I would love for you to talk a little bit more about the global context, and if Prince can then continue and talk a little bit about what are some other spaces in India and what are we learning from them.
Yeah, I think micro school has been there. Right? I think it's just not a concept that I think people have thought that it is a chain of thing, right? And a lot of schools which just started as a micro school, which later became like formalized schools or became like, very popular schools across the world and even in India also. I think like even if you look at Jigyasa, I think they moved from a micro school setup to a full-fledged school right now. So I think that's a journey a lot of schools take. Some of them continue to be like much more smaller and they remain in that size. Like I said, there are like home schools. I think 2-3 years back, I think somebody raised about 8 million to just create a network of micro schools. And the lens was very simple. If any house can just start any school, like if there are 8 kids in a house, they can start a school. And that is the lens to which the school has been reduced to. So I fundamentally think that it's a model which has been there for like a longer period of time, and we're just seeing the acceptance more and more right now, and probably because the the regulations are not very clear. Like parent, a lot of questions will remain with the parent in terms of how do they answer for it in India. That has not become the most popular vertical out there. But from an innovation lens, from a lens of iteration, from a lens of learners really enjoying the learning experience, I feel like micro schools are out there. I think the most popular one right now that everybody's talking is probably Astronova, where Elon Musk kids are gone, and he's now conceptualizing into a full-fledged school, where they basically use, I think, like different forms of tech, different forms of learning through experience. They're basically being experts to teach the kids rather than they going and learning through a conventional manner. So because Elon Musk is somebody that everybody looks up to, I think that becomes also like something that people aspire to see, that that's happening over there. But in my eyes, it happens like even from a church. A lot of church-based micro schools in US, where they run in churches. There are kids who just go and learn along with that religious education. They basically also learned other stuff through the same lens. In India, there are Gurukul systems which are also adopting a version of micro schools. A lot of tribal schools adopt a version of micro schools. I think it has always been there. I think probably Prince can share more on the Indian context.
Thank you. Do you mind repeating the two examples that you gave? One was Astronova and
other one was called Schoolhouse. The Schoolhouse was the funded one. I think they raised about 8 million. I don't know what happened to that 8 million, but they raised about 8 million to create a network of micro schools across the world. I think there is also Actone. Actone has about 250 schools across the world. I think I know somebody in India also who has an Actone license. So I think that's also been there.
Awesome. Over to you, Prince.
Yeah. I think when I define a micro school, you would have defined it, right? Like less than X number of kids can run out of any spaces. I think a lot of the alternative school do fit that bracket of a micro school. They just don't use that term. But in India, I feel in Pune, there are a few that I really loved going to. They do call them an alternative school, but in reality, they would be an micro school. Flourish School, Midun is the Acton Academy school in India. They're based out of Pune. Anubhuti and Jingyasa, all three of them are in Pune. If anybody's in Pune, do get a chance to go to them and talk to them. Very cool work they're doing. Very, very different ideas and philosophies in the way that they operate. But I think the core is that the same. We need to completely revamp what schooling and learning can look like. So yeah, that's the current landscape that I've seen in India. What I've not seen happen a lot is schools working with a mixed social diversity background. All the schools that I mentioned are also high income. They charge anywhere between 80 to 3 lakhs per annum. And so that's how they sustain. Somebody had put a question of how do we sustain micro schools? So the ones that I'm sharing are fee-paying models. And so they're self-sustaining in that aspect.
Got it. Okay. Awesome. I think I also just wanted to know, we saw during sports video that students just have a lot more, they're either working by themselves or working in smaller groups, and there's a lot more independence in that sense. So when we think about that, what is a classroom setting or a learning setting largely that looks like in micro school? If there is a learning session, or how does that actually play out? What is the role of teachers when we're thinking about such a hyper focus, such an individualized learning space? How does that look like for the children, and then what is the role that teachers play?
Sindhuri, you want to answer that?
Yeah. From the role of a teacher perspective, I think our approach has been more to understand where is the learner coming from, where is the learner interest, and I think using that as a base to go and then scaffold the learning for the child over a period of time. So the aspect of being able to co-learn with the student has been the approach. It definitely has been a space of challenge, because we're used to seeing where one teacher, and as a resource model, you're still trying to figure it out, because you need one teacher catering to, at least 30 kids for it to be a sustainable model. But from a teacher lens, I think building connection with the kids, listening to the kids, and having the ability to co-learn and scaffold the learning to get them into the goals that we would offer them is the thought process. And how can we do an individualized education plan approach while we work with kids? So these are some of the strategies that is there on ground.
Yeah, see, but like a simple example will be a 3D printer, right? Like you introduce the child to a software, you say there's a 3D printer and there's a software in which you can design. So this is the limit to which we probably design the learning. Then the child decides what he wants to design, right? It can be from a cup to a bubble blower to a Batman to whatever the kid wants. And then they do it. I think that's a flexibility that the space operates to say that like the child can do whatever they want in terms of the creativity. And then you go build that particular project out of it. And I think, that's where the learner agency comes from. But we don't know how to build a Batman. Like, even as a facilitator, I don't know how to build a Batman. But if the child gets stuck in the middle of it as a facilitator, I'm also learning with the child in terms of how do I go solve for that. And then I think that's the readiness that a facilitator needs to have in this kind of a space, more than anything else.
Yeah, Prince, anything to add there?
Sorry, can you repeat the question in a brief? Was it about learning, how learning is structured in a school?
I feel like I was just trying to get a sense of what does a learning experience or a learning session looks like for children, like how is it designed, and what is the role that then teachers or facilitators in that space play.
Yeah, that's a very loaded question. Very similar to what Midhun and Sindhuri shared. I think a philosophy that at Microleaps we hold is every child can learn on their own. This belief that we've held that adults need to be the one who teach children is such a false notion. Like everybody's an independent, curious learner by nature. We take it out of our children. So what will our learning space look like where a child can step in and then know, oh, I have agency here and I can learn on my own. If that's the question we hold, then we backward plan from there, saying, okay, what are the resources that they need? Are those resources accessible to them in terms of language, in terms of compatibility? Um, then if they're accessing those resources, are they able to make progress in those resources? There's a bunch of processes that we follow to understand, is the learning designed to help a child become self-directed? But I think the core idea for us is self-directed and self-paced learning for every child. How we design that is a sort of a bigger, longer conversation. So I'm gonna stop with that.
No worries. I think it's a work in progress. I'm just going to bring up another question that I'm seeing in the chat to just ensure that we don't miss out on it. There are questions around what board affiliation works for micro schools, and what is it that you both are thinking, you all are thinking for your space. So just tell us a little bit about that.
See, I think the fundamental lens that somebody starts a micro school is to move away from the dogma, right? So I think NIOS is the most seemingly easier option if you look at from a mixed income population. It's quite cheap to access for that, right? And the second thing is that I think Pearson EdXL, I think like for example, there is IB board, there is IGCC board. All of them have private way of approach, like applying for it. I think we also have taken work with IGCC, Pearson EdXL in terms of getting an IGCC license also to work on it, where our candidates can go right as a private candidate in another school under Pearson EdXL, and the curriculum is benchmarked towards it, which is also catering to the high income population because it's also expensive to do it. So depending on the audience that you're catering to, you can work on different boards. Bridges Learning caters to IB board, right? And there are like Bridges Online is accessed, I think, across 30 countries with different kids. So all those models are, I mean, the board is not a restriction by nature of it. But when you're creating a school saying you're affiliated to a particular board, you're also putting yourself in that box. So I see exam as a skill that a child needs to prepare for and write, not as something the child needs to prepare all their life for, right? So that's the lens to which we basically look at the board particular problem. I will solve for it when the time arises for a child to write an exam. And you can solve it through multiple boards and multiple lenses that's available over there. If they want to access a global education, they can go for IGCC board. If they just want a certificate and they believe in like very self-directed learning path for themselves, they can just do an NIOS. I don't think it differs in any manner.
Right, got it. I think since you were touching upon assessments, I think credentials and getting certified is one bit. But when you're looking at a larger journey and a larger trajectory for each learner at your space, is there a certain philosophy of assessments or displaying your work or advocating for it? Is there anything that what is it that you apply in your spaces, each of your spaces, when it comes to just a larger philosophy around assessments?
So, see, I think our lens has always been a very portfolio-based assessment, right? Saying that what can the child create? How does that portfolio look like? It can be a web-based portfolio or it can be a physical portfolio that they create, that they can just show to somebody saying, hey, I built these projects. Can I get a design project with you, right? That's more my lens of somebody having a portfolio of lens. And also in that, there is also rubric of assessment, which again assess them on different subjects, like what's their maths levels, what is their science levels, what their English levels at. So basically just map the child on it. But it is not something that I would be hung up over saying the child is scoring C in maths or B in science or something like that. It's more a rubric level to say that, yeah, kid knows these things. He can operate on these levels at, I mean, as per his age group, these are the different things he can operate. But in terms of what he's able to create, the portfolio is what we look at for assessment. And even like another test is like probably putting them out in the real world. Like an internship is a great test for somebody to go out and test it with the real industry and say that, hey, my skills are benchmarked towards X in the industry and I can just take it back, right? That's where we see us from an assessment lens. Flexibility, I mean, again, like there is nothing saying that a child needs to write. A child can express in different manner the way they want to be assessed. They can choose to write, they can choose to show, they can choose to talk about it, they can show different projects, they can complete different assignments, give it to us. But definitely there's a rigor that we add in terms of the child learning different skills that they would need to adapt. Like for example, if I have ADHD and I don't want to listen in the class, if I want to record, I can record my classes. And then I can probably just see the transcripts and learn on it. So those are the flexibilities that you bring, which even in the assessment phase. saying that, I can, if I'm anxious about probably presenting myself, I can record and then give it to you. And then you can just go through it. Right? So more around that. Sindhu, you want to add something on it?
Yeah, I think the one aspect is the thought of giving continuous constructive feedback as peers and as people in the space, right? For the child to fundamentally understand and reflect on what they are engaging in. And I think us building the lens to say that itself can be assessment for the kid. How we are as people able to engage to give that feedback. How are we able to take that feedback? And definitely, I think that is in the process itself, and that can then definitely we'll have a lot of the portfolios and other opportunities. A lot of what Medun said. So continuous feedback also being a part that I just wanted to add to this thought process.
Got it. Sindhuri, if you can help us build on what Ranjana is asking, right? Like, if teachers are not from that specific interest that a child holds, what is it? How are they actually also facilitating the assessment space and the portfolio building space?
I think it comes back to the aspect that can we go back to have a learning lens? And I think also find that the person whom you're hiring as a facilitator, is it of their interest to want to go back to that space? Is it aligned to a strength that they bring? So if you have someone who is probably moving careers in data analytics space, come from the tech space, then do you want them to say, hey, do you want to partner with a group of children in the work that they are taking on coding, math, and maybe computers? But if you have someone who's potentially moving from who's come from a CA space, then you'd want to say, hey, do you want to come and partner in curating some learning from a finance, business, and accounts perspective? So I think are we going specifically to that's one of the lenses we hold when we go to hire. But if not, can you just be with the learner and co-learn and move forward is the thought process we hold.
Got it. Okay. Prince, anything to add on that?
No, I'll add just one piece. I think demography-wise, what changes for us, very aligned to what Midun and Sindhuri shared around checking for portfolios, a lot of self-assessment, a lot of work through projects. So all of that is very aligned for us. What is also something that we are recognizing because we work with low income is whether we like it or not, board exam they have to give. They have to pass that exam. They have to go to college because that is a very simple, clear shot for them to access opportunities in life because they don't have the social capital that we do. And so they need to be able to write those exams. So exams are there, written exams are there for us. The difference that we're approaching it with is saying, we're not going to say, okay, by October, everybody's going to write this exam. Or by March, everybody's going to write the end of term exam. We're going to say, okay, you're going to write the exam when you're ready, but you will write the exam. You will show mastery, and when you show mastery, you'll move to the next part. And if that means you write the exam 2 times, 3 times, great, doesn't matter. Take your time, but write the exam. Because whether we like it or not, grade 10 mein jaake, you have to write the exam with your hand on a piece of paper and submit it to somebody, even in an iOS. And so that is a very real piece that we are grappling with, and also understanding that our parents and low income communities, if I propose something as radical and saying no exams, nobody will come. So there's some middle ground. We're saying, okay, we will have exams. It'll just look a little different. We'll assess the same things every school is assessing. We'll provide the same data every school is providing. It'll just look at thoda sa different for us. So that's the only one caveat that I wanted to add. But everything aligned with Sindhuri and Midun.
Thank you, Prince. I think I'm just gonna surface the last question I have, and I'm just bringing it from a few people who've asked that on the chat before I hand it over to just open it up for questions. Is on financial sustainability, right? Like, what are the kind of sources that you're largely looking at? Thanks, Midun. I'll see you smiling. So I think there are a few people who just want to know how do you actually sustain yourself financially, and what are some pathways to get there, and then we'll open up for audience Q&A.
See, honestly, finance is a hypothetical question at this point, right? Anybody who is building something is betting on a dream. That's the fundamental lens to doing it. I mean, I come from banking, so I believe in a very hybrid model of looking at this, right? I believe that the after school space that we are trying to create is something that would be open to a lot of like low income learners and for the community kids that are around for us. And the micro school is going to be a paid product by parents because we would need to like, kind of incentivize the facilitators and the people who are there to get the high quality resources we need. It would be continue to be a paid product. I don't think like the numbers that you need in from a traditional schooling lens, you would need at a micro school level. You can break even with about 40, 50 kids, aram say, right? And so I think it's running sustainable. But if you're there to make money in micro school, probably you need to set up a network of micro schools to make the money in it. I think it's more from the lens of or you need to have like a very strong model which is very hybrid. Like if it's, I think there are people who are running online hybrid models which are making insane money on it. Right? I think Dreamtime is an example of it. They make insane money on the models they run across the world. So it all depends on like like what your audience is and how you convince your mixed income audiences. Right? For example, I think anything that you try to start with a mixed income audience, the caveat is going to be that why would these two populations mix? And the experience we need from both the populations are very different. Then how do they mix? And for us, there is also the lens of neurodiversity. And how do all the three populations mix? I feel like those for us are fundamental questions that are currently we are trying to answer than trying to answer the finance question. Currently, we have both funding from grants. We also have some revenue coming from the parents who are accessing the after school space who can pay for it. So I think it's a mixed model that we have been trying to do. I think Prince is probably more on the grant-based model. So I think he can probably talk about the financial sustainability of that. With grants, I feel like the one lens that I always have is that, see, if you go to CSR who speaks big numbers, you may not get the money because they would want you to reach X number of kids. But if you go to a family house or if you go to a HNI who basically believes that this community needs to change or this community needs a shift, then probably they would be more interested to building and bet on that particular project, is my lens. So ideally your donor should be very local based, who believes in the community, who is part of that community to do that.
Very aligned to Midun. I think one of the challenges with micro school financing is that because you have such a low student to teacher ratio, your cost per child shoots up. And which is a benefit of a mass schooling system. If you have 500 kids, your cost per child will be like 50,000. And that's comparatively easy to scale than saying, okay, I will have 30 kids in a space and each child cost is going to be 1.5 lakh. Like CSR is going to be like, why will I spend 1.5 lakh per child on 30 children? Like that's nothing compared to the number of kids I want to reach. So we also are looking at a combination of cross subsidiary approach where we will have fee paying parent as well as grant based approach. Again, that's the hypothesis. We are right now working in an after school which is completely grant based. Next year when we launch our micro school, that's when we're going to pilot this cross subsidiary approach. So we will let you know how that turns out, folks.
Okay. Thank you so much. Sundari, anything to add before we move on there?
I think this is a long game. Once people start seeing the value and the process of what micro schools or smaller learning places have to offer, then I think different models of financing that will evolve. Until then, I totally believe parents need to go out and self-finance this. This is something that Midun and I have spoken about at many points of time. I'm sure this is not across the spectrum of low-income community or a high-income community, but this is one approach. And definitely, I always think about CSRs wanting to revisit what outcome means in education. So I think we should go back and rally to say that this sort of a personalized approach has a different societal outcome when we go out reaching for grants.
Thank you so much for that. We are just opening up for questions. Sherin, I know you had your hand raised. If you are still with us, feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, it wasn't a question. I think I was trying to help answer a question someone else had, that how do you check stuff like data or a math project or a science project if you do not have people with those competencies on your team, on your teacher team. I think an easy way would be to request specialists to come in. If children have school-led conferences or student-led conferences, just have people with the competences come in and check and give the answers. That should do it, shouldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I think finding
That's all.
assessments are not very hard. I think finding an assessment rubric or, to find, I think
Yeah.
that's what most of the educators create all the time. So
Yeah.
finding something to just
So
come
we
and
start with a rubric.
yeah.
You make the rubric first, and then you go about finding someone who can help you figure the rubric out. But if the rubric is made with the children, it might be easier.
And it
Yes,
changes
thank you.
project to project as well, right? Like depending on, what is the learning goal and things like that. So
Yeah. I keep mentioning this one story, right? Like when I was a mentor for ATL, there's one child, I went to a class and I gave them the origami exercise to do. There's one child who came back and gave me the same blank paper back to me. And I asked him, like, so what is this? He said, this is the basement of a building, right? He did no work. He just gave me back the paper back. How do you assess that child? Like, I should assess him on like 10 out of 10 for creativity and 10 out of 10 for outsmarting everybody else and not doing the work. So that's where I feel like the assessment lens usually fails with these kids.
Okay. We'll hear from Adil, then Ranjana.
So I just want to get this remark that I am in the space of after schooling and this thing providing. So whenever I'm just creating any cohort, so I focus on the learning outcomes. I, as a school, as you mentioned at the dogma, we have to come out of the dogma that we have the predetermined syllabus and the curriculum of that thing, but at least we need some learning outcomes. So how do you in this sport, how do you measure those learning outcomes and how do you make strategies out of it based on the learning outcomes for the kids? So this is like I really want to know about, because I really like the space that you have developed that early on in the video that we have watched out. So like everything, like every facilitator, every session has a role to play, and which eventually result into some learnings. So what are the learning outcomes that you are focusing?
You want to take it up, Sindhuri?
sometimes Adil, I think we look at the process of learning is itself the product. And many times we go with neurodiversity in the classroom. This is something Midun literally introduced me when I came here. And it talks about how there are different environments that you need to create for the child rather than go back and change the child themselves. So if you're looking at what's the learning outcome for the child, definitely from a tangibility point of view, there will be a portfolio. There will be how can we help the child express what they have built, all of that, and how they feel confident and empowered about themselves is the learning outcome that we will be looking at. But more than just focusing on whether they have hit 80% grades or 99% grades, I think you always go back to reflect on what that process and the environment look like to make that empowering for the child is where the energies go.
Yeah, exactly. We have to come out of the metrics of the numericals or the grade. Like we have to change the metrics based off out of assessment. Like when we are assessing any kid, like any learner, we have to think about different metrics rather than just thinking about any grades or numericals associated with that thing. Yeah. And it should be a like kind of personalized for that matter.
Yeah. How we can help the learner themselves communicate, where they come from. I think that feels like the win.
And really appreciate your team.
Thank you so much, Adil. Appreciate it. Ranjana, can we hear from you?
Yes, thank you, Meena. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Sindhuri and Midun and Prince for taking us through what you're doing. We are still sadly, unfortunately, stuck with CBSE schools and stopping whatever I'm teaching after 35, 40 minutes. I have to stop and start over in one class teaching social studies, another one teaching English. So have to switch, and even the children have to switch. Suddenly, maths hat, and then the English hat. So this is something that, I'm so passionate about it. And there was this, sorry to interrupt that, but I watched this TED talk which mentioned that, I quit teaching because I love it so much. So looks like I'm inching towards that, but hopefully that shouldn't happen. My question was that, are there certain themes or certain projects which you have right at the start of the year? It's like the planning which is done, that these are the themes that we are going to pick up for our students this year. Is that done in micro schools as well? Like we have a curriculum, is that done?
Yeah, see, I think just for the structure, I think children also don't like not having any structure, right? So I think for that particular thing, we have a three to 6 months curriculum. But again, it's more loosely designed from the lens, like I said, right? I would introduce you to a 3D printer, or introduce you to 3D software. But the creativity is of in terms of what you want to create, right? I would introduce you to gardening. I would teach you this, right? Then I will go more depth on that based on how you are going to create on that. So I think the structure is more from saying what we can facilitate in the 3 months plan that we have, not more. I mean, even from the project lens, like, I mean, for example, if I'm doing an aero modeling project, the project is introduced to a lens where how do you want to take it apart? Do you want to go into structural design? Do you want to go and build it? Do you want to go and like create a research paper on it? Right? That freedom is always there on the child to take the agency to different directions. So, but we do definitely benchmark ourselves to IGCSE curriculums and then create, some of the projects which are benchmarked to that. Because without any structure, it's very hard to operate as well. Because even the rubrics is also designed in a manner that we just will probably go and do it. Even finding facilitators, right? For example, if I am building if the team is space or something like that, I need to get two ISRO people to come and do it. So it definitely needs to be a structure over there to kind of seeing where that particular syllabus is being oriented towards. But it is not as structured as how you would say a 14-minute classroom would look like, from 20 minutes of facilitation, 10 minutes of reflection to that. I think the flexibility more moves around for us. I think what she says about explore, embark, from that lens, right? Like, so more from a definition lens of the 3 different stages that we see the learners doing it, introducing a concept, they're doing something, and then probably at the end of it, reflecting on it is what we try to close every session with. That's what we look at it. Sundar, you want to add something to it?
Yeah, lot on top of that. Some things that we've been doing is anchoring it on the spaces that we have to create it as a starting lens, right? That's why the maker space. So everything from being able to look at woodworking to electronics. So you can move from electronics to IoT, then building an app, coding, and then solving out in the real world. Go find a partner for whom you can develop an IoT based application, if that's the learning orientation of the child. So we do have about 3 learning spaces, so 3-4 tracks that we create. And then after about 3 to 6 months, we come back and listen to the child's preferences and then go about curating further projects and scaffolding for the child.
Okay, that sounds good. So are you always looking for people or experts to come in and...
Of course, Ranjana. No two ways about it. So always open to having folks who want to partner in this journey.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And when you work with,
is that also done at the beginning or on a 6-monthly basis, something like that, so that you have a ready resource of people with you? Or is it something that's ongoing?
yeah, see, currently, because we are, I mean, very, very young on the micro school part of it, right? For example, depending on the learner we get, there's a discovery process we do with the learner, and then understand what the learner wants to map, right? And based on that, usually we try to find the external resources we need, but the facilitators that we need in terms of a maker, in terms of a designer, in terms of, somebody doing those things are there internally, right? Like, so that's how we curate for it. And based on the child saying, like, for example, I think, we work with gifted kids, right? So there's some of the gifted kids come and ask you very accelerated stuff, saying that I want to do a space science research, or I want to say I want to create a correct, yeah. So I think they come up with very accelerated projects that we never heard of it. So then you have to go figure out who are the person who can come and support the child on that particular thing, because without that the kid is not even interested to come to your space. So sometimes the problems we are solving is that very radical in terms of that nature of it. But ideally the plan is to have a plan for at least 6 months for the child. Otherwise I think we'll fall apart on that.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Makes sense.
Thanks
Okay.
for that.
I'll share one piece before Ranjana quit. I feel very aligned to what Midun shared. Something for us that we do for projects is like project-based learning has its own philosophies and pillars on how you should approach project-based learning. You should check out their website. It's very well detailed there. And I think that's a very simple process that we also follow, defining a problem that we want our children to solve, and then aligning the curriculum to it. And that's worked. Like for math, something I remember we did for one was like, if you had to set up a successful business, food stall business, how would you do it? And so kids had to make food, sell it, and make a profit. Through maths, whatever they learned was like profit and loss, proportions, ratios, just a bunch of other concepts. So I think that's how we approach it. We're saying, okay, what is a problem statement that we offer our children, and then what curriculum fits into it. It may not be grade relevant, that's fine, but what curriculum fits into it. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much for that, Ranjana. Sri Vidya, can we hear from you? Actually, I'll just read out your question. How do parents actually partner or contribute to your setup? I know you did mention that community is a big part of what you're doing at Spot, but I would love to hear your insights there. Prince, can we start with you? How you're collaborating and partnering with parents or the community?
Yeah. Because the idea is new, your parents are your biggest champions. Like nobody has more stakes in than the child of the parent whose child is in the school. And so right off the bat, we realize, okay, we need to get the parents in the door and convince them that this is necessary. What we do in our after school right now is talking to parents on a monthly basis and even doing home visits to understand what's working, what's not working, what are they seeing shift in their child. And in the last few months, we've seen a few barriers that we are noticing that we need to address in the coming few months. But to answer your question, Srividya, how can parents contribute effectively to a micro school setup? It's like you have a community of parents that you know, and they will trust you and vouch your words a lot stronger than what we have to offer. So if you vouch for a micro school, I think that's a really strong way of helping anybody set up a micro school in your region. Because that's what I look for, right? I look for parent champions who are going to help us mobilize the other parents in the region and bring those students to the school. That's I think what a strong role of a parent can be. And of course, the role of an institution is then to inspire those parents, help them understand why this shift is necessary, even though it's radical. And that's where we sort of have to play our cards. Mithun, Sindhuri, what have you experienced?
Sindhuri is the parent here, but I think I'll probably say one or two lines before I give to Sindhuri. See, I think fundamentally, I think when I started thinking about sport, something I always thought was that, I mean, school is basically a fundamental product for a parent, right? And it's where they're going to invest 12 years of their life for a child to go and learn something. And why is there no ROI on a parent being part of a school, right? I mean, it's a cost structure. It's the biggest cost structure a parent has in terms of their life to spend on their child's education. So I've even thought of like RET ideas in terms of can 30, 40 parents on a school, right? And the returns on the school goes to that particular set of parents and they can sell the share to another parent who would want to come in. That's the level to which I usually think the parent participation is. That the parent should co-create and co-own the school. Like if I am starting a micro school, ideally I want 10 of my first parents to be investors in the school, right? Who basically invest with me to build that particular school and probably put the resources out there. Second part of it is that they need to be the facilitators. They need to know that what a child is learning. They also need to share the learning they have with other children. And even have like spaces where you co-create with different parents, like, I mean, bring the food that somebody's cooking and share it with other children in the school, right? Like make them part of different festivals that you celebrate in the micro school setup with every other parent. And the more community are able to drive in through these parents is where a success of micro school leverages on. You can't keep the parents outside the gate and run a micro school. That's fundamental lens for me. Sindhu, you want to add something to it?
I think Prince and Madhun covered most of it in terms of philosophy. I think me being a parent, I feel there's such a big barrier between what is happening within the school and what's outside. And how can we break that? As much as parents want to, support this, I think the environment must also feel welcoming of the parent. And I think the ideas need to be aligned from the parental expectations. Parents always want 100% marks for all their kids. Then it's very difficult for a school to let them get involved and then, handle what it has, what they have to offer. So I think parents also building a certain understanding of philosophy of education and then bringing together that right community can really make a lot of sense for the learner, for the child themselves. So parents being an integral part of micro schools, especially when they don't exist, definitely feels like the direction in which it can even take some shape and form.
Thank you so much for that. I think we're just going to take the last question before we come to a close. Juhi, I was just looking at your comment and you mentioned that you'd want to know a little bit more about how do you create marketing or more noise, more visibilization around what you are building, and if there are any suggestions there. And yeah, and I think Midun would also like to visit your space, Julie, as he's mentioned. If there are any thoughts on this, feel free to share. No?
Midun, share.
What to share? Marketing. I mean, that's something we are struggling with. I think, convincing parents of something that's away from mainstream is always hard. But it works both ways, right? Once you are able to convince them, you create such loyal followers that you actually struggle to say no. Like, I mean, that's my experience of building anything in the education space has been that until they understand you, it takes time. The one moment they understand you, they see the value proposition, and everybody wants the same product, and you can't offer it to everybody. And that's how most good schools are running. So if you feel that your school has more demand than you can supply, that means you're doing a good job, right? If you still don't think there is enough demand, I think there is something that you need to go out there and talk about it or put it in different places. We have not done any formal marketing as such. I think we have tried Instagram, Facebook, I think a little bit on that. Beyond that is more of, I think the founders going and speaking about it in different places. That is what we are primarily doing. We have also been very reluctant to market because we don't know what we are marketing at the time, because we're building something very new. And that also caters to the problem that we have. But I think, finding your first 30 parents is a very crucial thing. I think is that what we are also trying to do in this particular space. So, I mean, I'm happy to come and see your place and learn from your journey as well.
Right. Thank you. Thanks for the honesty. Thank you so much. Sharon, I see your hand raised again. Let us know if you have anything to say, but we're coming to a close. But we'll just hear from you, Sharon.
Yeah, I'll be very quick to Midun and Noble and Prince. Odd questions, so please feel free to completely not answer them. One, has the move from whatever you're doing earlier, Midun, I remember you said you were banking, to what you're doing right now, paid off? Apart from the spiritual and fun aspect of it, like standard of living wise, whatever, has it been worth it in terms of money? And secondly, because a lot of you do not, from what I understood, come from the background of education, how do you account for pedagogy training? Because there must be a lot of catching up to do there. Thank you very much. Please feel free not to answer either. I understand it's stepping over a line. Thank you and all the best to you.
Sindhuri, do you want to answer it?
Yeah,
Yes.
I think when we step into this, we've had in all honesty, Midun and I have had conversation about this in many different ways. Are we for profit, non-profit, in all honesty? I think where we are right now, we just know that this needs to be done. So we are here. So does it feel worth it? It definitely feels worth it. And if we were to say, hey, is it is there going to be a challenge? There are going to be challenges, and then we'll figure it out along the way. But if you don't decide to take a step about it, then you just never have taken a step about it. So I think that's the answer I have on that space. In terms of pedagogical lens, I think people like Circle, that's why Circle is our biggest champion, right? Like we go back to them, and then it's a whole Circle university that's going to come together, and we're always open to people who have done pedagogy in a different sense, but are also wanting to reorient it from a learner point of view and then take it forward from there. That's when the collaboration to do this with different people, always open to it. And it is going to be built with people who come from that expertise, but holding the learner at the center and wanting to learn with the learner.
Yeah. I think regarding pedagogy, I think fundamental lens has been that there is enough information out there. Like, for example, Bridges has a really good gifted and 2E program, right? A DEND has a really good maker curriculum. I mean, a maker guide has a really good maker space. So I feel like sometimes your innovation is more from the lens of what you want to facilitate than from the whole pedagogical lens. From a pedagogical lens, our philosophy may be very different in terms of very alt in terms of how we want to do it on the ground. And we do have like enough mentors and coaches that we go and probably work on that. I think I worked with Andrea for about a year from US, was set up about, network of what you call charter schools in US. It was been our pedagogical partner on that. So I feel like you can find enough people around the lens to do it. And I always say that I'm an entrepreneur first and an educator second, right? So I see it from the same lens and I work on it. Has the journey been rewarding? Yes. I think my banking journey, though it was giving me financial happiness, I don't think I was very happy about like the whole career that I had over there. But I think last 3-4 years I've been a social entrepreneur, and I can see that there is both rewards, both material as well as non-material rewards to it. At least I don't have, I mean, I have an ownership of my time, right? Which is very important for me to do what I want. Is something I enjoy. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for clarifying that, Prince. Also, I was thinking that we didn't mention that you are also a Teach for India. You've been a Teach for India fellow, and you clarified that. Thank you. But anything
Sorry,
to
I was a TFI fellow. I did 2 years of coaching and training of teachers. Then this, so I've been pedagogy is like second nature now. I know that more than anything. But yeah.
Okay. Awesome. I think we're just going to come to a close. Sorry for we couldn't take your question, but I hope you gained something from all the other responses that Sindhuri, Mithun, and Prince gave. Thank you so much for engaging with this forum. This has been actually one of our longer formats. So I really appreciate the people who've stayed back and really engaged and listened to the conversation. I'm going to put the feedback form very quickly. I'm going to request you to please fill it out. We have a surprise gift for one of the people who fill out the feedback form. So take your shot at it. And we really appreciate you to just send in your feedback. And to Sindhuri, Nidun, and Prince, thank you so much for joining us. I know it's been very hectic for all of you, and I really appreciate you all coming together and to the Spot team for putting this together. Have a great rest of the evening, and we'll see you around. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, folks. Thanks
Take
to the
care,
Spot
folks.
team and